Welcome to part 2 of our interview with Alexandros Washburn. If you haven't heard part 1 yet, make sure to go back and give that a listen. As always, make sure to like and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We're on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Just look up I Know This Guy and we'll be there. That's enough of me, and now for the rest of the interview.
You're talking about resilience. I want to talk about a quote that you said. And basically, a city is the most complex living entity on the world. You want to elaborate on that a bit?
Sure. Yeah. Let's see. It's 2021 now. So we have, let's put it in a little bit of a scientific context. Now we have these things called neural networks. Do you know how those work? And when you talk about artificial intelligence, AI, and the ability to solve these amazing problems in no time at all, and to learn. In other words, there's no programming so much as there is show examples, and the neural network then learns. What is a city other than a very advanced neural networks? I mean, we are, our own brains are neural networks that gave us that first jump in intelligence. And then when we came together in cities, we bring our intelligence in proximity to other people, and we benefit from their intelligence. And so our one person mind now interacts with a million other minds. And certainly in the time before there was instant communication anywhere over the world, if you wanted to come up with an idea, and an idea would come up through a chance encounter and the sort of meeting of the minds, you were going to meet other minds in a city, not out in some rural place. You had to be around other people. I think that's the sort of the basis of the complexity. And not to put it too much into the scientific, neural network side, but just if you believe that two heads are better than one, right? So that's a good way of putting it. If you believe that two heads are better than one, then a city is better than anywhere else. A city of 1 million, a city of 10 million now. Now we're getting to, cities that we're going to be talking about 40 and 60 million. Although we've had cities of 60 million already, and they are right here between Washington and Boston, the Boswash corridor. We've actually had that since the late 60s. And I'm kind of a product of that. I'm equally at home. I grew up in DC, I work in New York, I went to school in Boston. In its function, it's just one urban agglomeration. The complexity of that agglomeration is amazing, but the results, the fruits of that complexity are also amazing. The greatest buildings in the world, the best schools, the most. It's a way of it's a way of creating something not out of nothing, but making 2 and 2 equal 10, which is very hard to do when you're alone. So look, that when we talk then about cities are alive, cities make collective decisions. Cities are complex. Okay, now you've kind of made me put on the professor hat and the science hat, and I don't know, this is going to get too boring for a podcast. But there's something called a complex adaptive system. It's where you make decisions not by following a rule book. You make decisions by making one decision, seeing its effect, debating the effect of that effect, and then changing the rules for the next decision, and on and on and on, so that you adapt every time. I mean, evolution is the biggest scale version of a complex adaptive system, but simply the New York City zoning code is another example of a complex adaptive system. It changes over time. New York City doesn't have a master plan. It has a zoning code, a zoning text, and a zoning map, which are allowed to be changed every 2 weeks through a very public process. That process could use speeding up a little bit, and it's actually have a spin-off company, a software company called InSitu, INCITU, that is just launching now with Schmidt Futures, and its goal is to speed up the public process of the review of changes, proposed new buildings, proposed changes in laws, so that people can see it in real time and we can analyze its effect in real time, and therefore be able to speed up this process of amending the zoning text and the zoning map into a real-time process that'll let us do it more accurately, more quickly, and adapt hopefully more effectively, to things like climate change and others that we have to do on a much faster basis. Remember, no more 25-year train stations. Let's get this done. So what a sprawling answer I've given you.
Love it.
Sorry about that. And I don't just mean Paris, and I don't just mean, Barcelona, but even a city like Sao Paulo. That's actually pretty ugly physically. It's just nothing, but the people are so wonderful and complicated and intricate. And people like Philip and many others like him, that's the city of Sao Paulo. It's the citizens of Sao Paulo. And you know what? There you go. So this is the difference between complexity and complicatedness. A fighter jet is a very complicated system until you put in a pilot, a human. Then it becomes a complex system. Complex systems are impossible to truly predict. A city is a complex system. It's impossible to predict with 100% accuracy what today's city will be tomorrow. But that's why it's also impossible to be bored in a city.
Let's talk a bit about your work with Draw Brooklyn.
Sure. Yeah. Wow. Yesterday we filed our first submission for approvals for a great new project, actually just a block away from here. It's called the Model Block. It's going to be an amazing project, and it's a community-led project. But wow. So yeah, you catch me after a pretty intense, I would say, week, but it's actually been several months of getting this all coordinated together. But DRAW stands for Design Research Alexandros Washburn. I think it's a really good name, a design firm. And I think it's also kind of funny that it took me about 35 years to figure that one out. If I just put my initials with Design Research, I'd have DRAW, right? So there you go. It took a long time to figure that out. But what it does is it lets me kind of make real a lot of the stuff that I've researched or thought about, whether it's software spin-offs like in situ or real-world projects like this Model Block that we're doing here, which goes against all the mistakes that we make in zoning so far. Zoning, just the word zone, means to separate out. So you often put housing here, and you put making there, and retail here, and they're all separated. And that's not good. That's not how a real city should work. That is something that came out of the early 20th century modernist movement, and it is wrong. So what I did here with DRAW, actually in this room, is after Hurricane Sandy, I would ask all my neighbors as they walked by to come in, and we'd have planning meetings. I said, what do we love most about Red Hook? And what does Red Hook need most? And how can we put it all into a single block? And, we did this for almost 5 years. And what Red Hook needed? Housing, jobs, clean up the environment, and become more resilient. So taking that as our goal, we set about looking for possible sites that you could build this out, at the block scale. And we were able to get a hold of a site of an abandoned factory and negotiate its purchase, and bring in a developer partner as well. And now we've got a project that we call the Model Block that is going to provide, we like to say, one job, one bed. So on the same block, we're going to make apartments, but we're also going to make workshops, and they're going to be connected, and there'll also be restaurants. Red Hook has a very creative restaurateur setup. Some of our model citizens are people who've made Fort Defiance or Hometown Barbecue, or places that, if you're into the foodie world, get kind of international press. So we want to be able to make more of that. We also have creative people who make things like these cutouts behind me. That's from Canberra Studio. We have artists who make amazing things. My neighbor Bosco Sodi is a great artist. We gave him he works in Mexico, he works here. How do we put all this in block? And also, how do we create affordable housing? The population of Red Hook is more than 50% in public housing, which is just a block away the other direction. How can we make a project that will be able to afford apartments? So, for instance, if you've grown up in the houses and you want to stay in Red Hook, that we could get an apartment that you could afford and make that next step, but keep yourself in the neighborhood, keep the human capital here. And that's what this project does. And in doing so, it needs a variance from a couple of very, I think, misguided zoning perceptions. There is mixed use zoning in New York, but it's not quite worked out. So this project will be able to create a model, we hope, that could be thought of for the future. But in the meantime, it's making it work. That's the key. And real estate, it's not exactly a risk-taking endeavor. Successful real estate developers usually go somewhere and they see a project that worked and they say to the architect, I want one just like that, only cheaper. So you have to have succeeded before you can make others follow your change. And that's what we hope to do for the first time. It's very unusual that you would have a community-led major real estate project in New York City. And that's what we're doing, a project that's come out of what people in the community want and addresses what people in the community need first and foremost.
Congratulations.
Well, we're just starting. Remember, we talked about persistence. I mean,
Yeah.
We just submitted. Now they're going to be reviews and public hearings and then more engineering and more financing. A big part of this project is that I said it was an old factory. Well, this is a factory that built the boilers that powered the steam engines that dug the Panama Canal. So in doing that heavy duty industry back in the 19th century, there's a lot of pollution left on the site. So our unique hardship is to clean up the site. But it is also that hardship that opens this particular pathway towards approval. So if we get this to work, it will be righting that wrong of past pollution opens the door to a new method of envisioning a New York City block where you can live and work in the same block. I live and work in the same house. My neighbors do much the same. We like walk-to-work jobs in Red Hook, and we think it's going to be the future. But first, we have to build it here in the present.
So, harmony and beauty within the city. But while you're doing that, while you're creating this harmony and beauty, you're trying to solve problems within the past issues and thinking of future needs. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
I'm going to go back to Philip. Philip when he was on, and again, if you're listening to this podcast, you got to check out Philip Yang's podcast. It was so well done. I'm not talking about Hayden's producing it, but that's a whole other story. But anyways, he said something that stuck with me, and that was the importance of market, government, and society or social forces working together. And if they don't, you won't get harmony. Have you ever encountered any projects where this wasn't the case?
I think the answer is that it's all too often not the case. It's all too often where you'll get something built from a top-down point of view that because it understands how hard it is to bring these other forces into harmony. My version of Philip's harmony is to get politics, finance, and design to align, but it's hard to do that. So very often you will get finance just pushing something through. You will get politics just cutting corners, all in the name of expediency. And the way you do that is to just put on blinders and pretend to not see the effects of what you're doing, because I think they are pretty visible when you build a highway like was built that cut off Red Hook from the rest of Brooklyn. You know, not a good move, but it's done. And we have to live with that. Right now, we also have an invasion of last mile warehouses. Amazon, you have feelings about Amazon, love hate with Amazon, but they are taking over because we're a very centrally located neighborhood. They're taking over a lot of the sites that we had wanted that are supposed to be creating jobs, but these are all automated and on the way to becoming fully roboticized facilities that bring in goods made elsewhere and supplant goods that we make here. And they are proliferating here because they are what we call as of right. The way the zoning code is written right now, they're fine. You don't actually need any special approval. You just build them. And that's wrong. That is having a bad effect on our neighborhood, and we need to come up with an alternative to that. An alternative that creates jobs, that creates housing, that takes care of the pollution of the past, that helps us become more resilient to the climate change that is coming. And that's just not on the agenda for these last mile warehouses. That's not what they're about. And there's nothing we can do to make their builders see that or care about that. So, yeah, the answer to your question is that most of what's built does not, seek harmony. That's it's a very Philip term. He's a very calm demeanor guy. I'm probably a lot less calm, but harmony, yeah. What is that song? Is it Morrissey? Peace, love, and understanding, maybe in the next world. So I guess that's a little bit where I would give a different perspective maybe than Philip's, and that is that you have to. Nothing good is going to get built without a fight, but it's worth having that fight, and it's worth succeeding.
Penn Station.
Yep.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about your book. So, The Nature of Urban Design, a New York Perspective on Resilience.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is a book that, I got a grant from the Rockefeller Foundation to write when I began as chief urban designer at the Department of City Planning. This was a new position, chief urban designer. It had existed briefly under Mayor Lindsay, and then had got sort of subsumed. And it was my job. I was asked to come into the Department of City Planning and create a division called urban design that would be able to become the design eyes of government, essentially. And we had the political will there, both from Mayor Bloomberg at the top and Amanda Burden, who is the chair of city planning. And it's interesting, Amanda Burden is an extraordinary person all around. And yeah, that was she, it's a very, very interesting person. But her stepfather, was the one who built Paley Park, the Vest Pocket Park in Manhattan. And she saw that getting built. And I believe that some of those lessons are what drove her towards wanting design excellence in urban design. And I guess the book was meant to chronicle and to pull out thoughts and patterns and maybe even rules that could be replicated about how to bring urban design into cities and into government. So, I was busy writing that. Unfortunately, it took me so long to write it that we got flooded by a major hurricane in the meantime. So the middle of the book is, the products, the process of urban design. But the beginning and ending of the book is my house, my city, my neighborhood getting flooded. And the end of the book is, okay, how are we going to become resilient and sustainable? And so if you're into it, it's a great book that will both sort of set the scene of what's coming with climate change, because, New York, we get it because we got it. We got flooded. We got hit really bad. So we get it. We understand this. And then the middle of the book are chapters that show you how to do urban design projects, who's involved, what they care about, what are the mechanics behind them, with an example of the High Line and the West Chelsea Special District, as its formal name is called, how we did the High Line in New York. And so you get a sense of the tools. And I mean these tools not to be for bureaucrats only, not to be for mayors. I like to say, like, I wrote my book so that even a mayor could read it, but it's it's meant for everybody, because the goal is that everybody should have a feeling that they can change their city. Yeah, maybe it's just at the scale of a flower box, but it's still change. And if you are in the right place at the right time, you can change many, many, many things if you know where all the pulleys and levers are and are connected. And that's what the book tells you. But it puts it in the context of resilience, because that's what has to guide the future of building cities. So there's some technical stuff in there, like the risk equation and how to quantify what can be done, how to compare one project against another. And then there's a lot of qualitative stuff in there about how you can make your city better, how are you going to leave it better than you found it, how you can take an existing city and change it rather than just going out and building an entirely new city.
I'm listening to what you're saying, and it sounds like entrepreneurs could take this book and learn a lot from it. Brands can take a look at this book and learn a lot from what you're saying.
Yeah, I think absolutely they could. And that a couple of years ago, I was asked to go to Singapore and give a talk to one of their major companies. What my city can teach your company about sustainability. It's the same set of values, of concept plans, of alignment. These go over and over together to show you a pathway to success that is open to everybody. That's a key factor. Remember, we keep going back to that in urban design. It's not one person. In Penn Station, it was not just me. I started the ball rolling. It was great. I got a very important role, but I handed the baton off, and that baton was handed and handed and handed off, and finally to a wonderful person who's unfortunately not here to see the finish line, Michael Evans. But it is everyone. And I guess in other business and entrepreneurial endeavors, if you can create that same feeling where everyone works together, then you can accomplish an enormous amount. And what I hope in the sort of the real estate world is that we're going to start seeing that resilience can come not from some big, fat, expensive, federally funded project, but from everyday city building. That if you build your city in the right way, it will be resilient, and you will make money off of building each step. The infrastructure developer can make a profit. The land developer can make some profit. The building developer can make some profit. The manager can make some profit. Not because the whole point is we're trying to pursue profit, but if it's not profitable, it's not replicable. And cities grow by repetition. So let's set up the system in a way that its goal is to make our cities resilient and to make them wonderful to live in. And then let's let the mechanics of everyday building apply and multiply those efforts and achieve a whole city that's going to be extraordinary. I think we can do it. And what's more important is I think we have to. We just don't have any choice. Things are changing, and we will have to rebuild our cities, and we'll have to build new cities. It's here, it's now, it's upon us, and I think it's an opportunity, and I hope we can see that opportunity and see that resilience is a net positive all around, and not something that we have to think of as either too difficult or too expensive to achieve. No, it's something that we can do, and it's something that to succeed has to work at every level. But if it works at every level, it can provide economic development, social development at every level too.
Alex, a lot of people know what green roof initiatives are. I read an article and it mentioned you, and you were talking about blue roof. Can you tell us exactly what you meant by blue roof initiatives?
Sure. Well, a blue roof is simply a roof that is shaped with some edges that can keep a certain amount of water on your roof before letting it go into the sewer system or into the street or into the stormwater sewer. So it detains water. And so a blue roof, think of it as a, a very, very shallow swimming pool, like an inch or two or three, so that it's not too heavy for your structure, and you can do it on almost any building. What's actually kind of cool about this is that now we actually roofs, people are rediscovering their roofs. Both is a great place to have a beautiful view, but they're rediscovering what roofs can do. Just a few years ago, all we used to do was tar the roof with with black tar, and there it is, done. But then we realized that was contributing to a heat island effect, and that dark surface was absorbing heat and radiating it out. So we said, okay, passed a rule, you got to paint your roof silver. So now the roofs are silver. So now we've kind of mitigated that heat island effect. But then we started seeing that, oh God, during these rain events, we're overburdening our sewer systems. Tell you what, each building, why don't you retain a little bit of your water in a blue roof on your roof until the storm passes, the sewers kind of clear out, get some capacity, and then let the water go back in. And then the next step is you realize, well, if you can do a green roof, why not do a blue roof? So put some soil on the roof, grow some plants. Now the plants are absorbing some of the sunlight and turning it into biomass, and the soil is acting like a sponge that can be effectively operating like a blue roof in partially. And then we started seeing, okay, now that we've got that, well, how about some solar power? The roofs get a lot of sun. Why don't we put some solar panels over that and now start to generate a little bit of power? So if you do the whole package, now you've generated power, you have detained stormwater, you have insulated your roof with green biomass, and you've entirely removed the heat island effect. So it was all totally doable, and it was all totally illegal. So that's because our zoning code was out of date. And my colleagues at City Planning did a wonderful initiative called Zone Green. And this is something that we wrestled with. But, solar panels didn't exist in 1961 when the zoning resolution was first written and permissible obstructions were defined. Putting plants on your roof would be considered a little bit crazy back in 1961 as well. So anyway, it took a lot of legislative effort to change that zoning code through Zone Green. Anyway, we did it, and it should be continually updated, but it's achieving change, and that change is beginning to happen. I personally have a saying that every building should generate a portion of the resources it consumes. If it consumes land, it should be more than one story, so it creates space. If it consumes electrical power, it should generate electrical power through solar panels. If it consumes food, it should grow some food on it as well. If it consumes water, it should detain water. And I think as long as that thinking becomes part of every design, we're going to end up with more and more efficient buildings that are also going to be more and more pleasant. I mean, I like eating blueberries from the blueberry plants on my roof.
Wow, I would not have thought about that.
Yeah, it's doable,
Yeah. No, wow. It's just a different mindset, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just that there's a lot of bounty out there. I mean, you can. It's not just do your homework, take your medicine. No, it's like figure out how you can do it better. It'll be funner. It'll be profitable. It's aligning these forces and then just unleashing our abilities. We can do a lot. We can do a tremendous amount as citizens in cities.
So you're talking about cities. One of the things that, I live in a small rural town. So somewhere along the line, we ate up some farmland. But it really bothers me whenever I go into Toronto. So it used to take me about 45 minutes to get into Toronto, and there's basically no houses. Now we're seeing farmland after farmland after farmland. It's almost reached me now, and I am 2 hours away from downtown Toronto and about 45 minutes from the suburbs of Toronto. And now there's pretty much no farmland left. And what I'm seeing is single dwelling homes eating up the farmland. I don't know where we go after the farmland's eaten up, but again, taking what you're saying and maybe changes, I don't know if you can to single homes. I wish that you'd start to see a reduction, especially with new developed homes, but more apartments, more condos, more, going up rather than wide. I've seen over 10 years, something I never would have thought I would have seen. And that basically the suburbs of Toronto have reached my, few minutes away from me.
Yeah, that's that sprawl that's the repetition going, but it's the wrong rules. And there's a lot of hidden costs in that. There's a lot of cross subsidies that nobody's really seeing or talking about, like extending sewer lines miles further than they have to because everyone's so spread out, power lines and services. The suburbs are really just low density cities. I mean, I know there's sort of at least in America, in the US, there's often like a frontier mentality. Aha, I don't see my neighbors. I am on the prairie. No, you have a fire department, you have a police department, you have internet, you have a gas line, you have electric power, you even have a trash truck that comes up and picks up your trash. You are in a city. It is just a very low density city. Hey, which is fine if you can afford it, but we can't afford it in the collective. And the first metric there is the ratio of the ground that you take to build the living space that you live in. And in the case here, it's a negative ratio. It's less than 1 ratio. So it's probably 0.25, not negative. I'm sorry. 1 is the inflection point there. So New York is kind of interesting as a city. In Staten Island, our most kind of suburban feeling borough, there's a ratio of 0.3. But then in Midtown Manhattan, we have a ratio of 30. So we have 100 times variation in the same city, and that variation lets you, people like diversity, people like options. So in the same city, you can have very tall, and you can have even some spread out. But there's a balance in New York towards the density, and I don't know how Toronto is defines itself legally. Is there a county around it? Is it a center city? I don't know. New York is all 5 boroughs. It's a big place, a lot of people, and so you can turn the dials of these regulations without having to cross a political boundary. I mean, we're getting super, in the weeds here. So bottom line is that, yes, sort of unmitigated sprawl, it's just very expensive in ways that you don't see. It seems like it's cheap. The house, this house is more affordable than that one. But no, when you add in the extra costs that everyone is paying for in some way, it adds up. And it's you have to find that right balance. You got to get in touch with Philip to find the right harmony for Toronto, I guess.
Yeah. All right. So what's the future plans for New York City's landscape?
New York City's landscape?
Yeah.
When?
What's it going to look like?
New York City's landscape, I think that the streets are going to get more and more like parks. I think that the area that's paved over for cars and parking is eventually going to get smaller. We've already started doing it for bike paths and some dedicated bus lanes, but I think the next phase is going to be for drainage and having porous streets. Actually, my community, Red Hook, we have a group called Resilient Red Hook, and that's one of our initiatives that we're going to start just now, is trying to imagine a more sustainable street. It's been forever that we just do the same thing of a concrete sidewalk, a curb, a gutter, and then a paved street to the other side. That doesn't have to be that way. And you can have many more trees. You can have strips of bioswales. You can have it be a much organic space. So if you ask me for a prediction, looking out kind of 50 years, I think that nature is going to take a larger role in the infrastructure of cities. I think that nature is going to be more visibly and explicitly a part of how we build both the horizontal spaces, but it's going to start coming into buildings and houses and supported there. Call it like the hanging gardens of Manhattan maybe. But I think you're going to start feeling a much more park-like setting in the day-to-day blocks of cities.
All right, so now we're going to get into an area of the podcast where we've talked about your backstory. I'd like to know your biggest struggles, what they were, how did you get through it, and what did you learn from it?
I think the biggest struggle that I had early on was seeing my city go to hell in a handbasket, the place I grew up in, and just deciding that I had to do something about it, back on Capitol Hill, and then seeing an opportunity through Senator Moynihan to do it on a bigger scale, but then seeing that the struggle portion of it just got bigger as well. I don't. Yeah, it's hard to talk about your own struggles. You don't want to sound, like you're overblowing them, because everybody has struggles. Maybe I would just focus on the reverse, that I'm just very, very lucky to have been given entry into arenas where I could turn the struggle into a competition, it's like being let in to a Yankees game or something, but as a player. You see what I mean? That's through Senator Moynihan, through Mayor Bloomberg, through all these, now through the model block. It's the sense that you can struggle as part of something, as part of a team, as part of a project. And then that somehow takes away the feelings of loneliness or impossibleness, the ability to bring laughter into your endeavor, because you are with others, working and working together and towards something that seems so, maybe seems impossible even. But yeah, that's all I'd say is that, yeah, my struggle was to make my city better, and my success was to find leaders and mentors and friends and co-workers, and that made it into a project. Yeah, with laughter and with discovery, plenty of getting beaten over the head with failure, but somehow it just didn't hurt. Because you're part of a team. It sounds goofy, and I don't mean,
No, it doesn't sound goofy at all. I love your answer.
Oh.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I can't believe it, but we are probably an hour and a half into this. We're at the end of the podcast. And at the end of every podcast, we always ask our guest if they know a guy.
Well, I know a lot of
I'm sure you do.
people. Yeah. I think somebody pretty amazing is Amanda Burden. I think she's quite amazing. I don't know if you know Kevin Sheekey, Bloomberg. These are all super interesting people.
Yeah.
I think Kevin extraordinary, and so is Amanda. And who else? What kind of what would you like to learn about, maybe? And I can kind of point you in the right direction.
Well, we've had from Philip to, we just interviewed the real Donnie Brasco last week. So Joe Pistone. So everything in between. But what we're looking for real people, just people that have interesting stories. That's what we're looking for.
There's a friend of mine, Karen Blondell, who lives here in the Red Hook houses. She's an environmental justice advocate and coordinator and mom as well. She is a very interesting person. But if you want to stay local to Red Hook, I can put a sign here in the window if you want, like, interesting people needed.
Perfect.
And I'm sure you're going to get a lot of interesting people that walk right by that door. Okay. So that's what I'll promise you then, Nelf.
All right.
You gotta, anytime you need them, we'll bring them in here for you.
Okay. There we go. An endless amount of interesting people. But anyways, I just wanted to say how much I enjoyed talking with you and getting to know you over the last hour and a half. It's been a real pleasure.
Well, thanks. It's been a real pleasure for me too. I've felt like a wonderful conversation with you and your listeners. And at some point, it'd be great to see you in person as well.
Yeah, hopefully either in Brooklyn or up in Toronto.
That would be great.
All right, Alex. So thank you for coming onto the podcast, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much, Norm.
All right. So what did you think of that one?
Wow. What a great guy. The whole time he was talking, you could just tell he was talking about, helping people, helping build a better society.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about building a better community and what he's doing and how he's doing it to achieve it. I thought it was very interesting what he was talking about with, getting the political means, the finances, and then, just kind of putting it all together. 25 years on a project.
Yeah.
That's staying power.
Think of who you were 25 years ago.
Yeah. Did you hear how he described the original Penn Station?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I really loved, just how he described it, and then it was ripped down, basically tossed into Jersey Meadows and then Madison Avenue. I like how he described Madison Square Gardens was put up in some shitty building.
You can tell he had some feelings about that.
Yeah. All right. So, yep. We got to post all that information about his book and the YouTube video with the secret island.
That's right.
And we'll have that all in the show notes.
All right. Well, that concludes another episode.
Yes.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
We'll talk soon.
Till next time. Okay, so up next week we have Matthew Barley. Matthew is a world-renowned cellist and music educator. He's played with some of the greatest orchestras from around the world, along with his own projects that show his fluidity through genres. We touched a lot on the creative process, but also on overcoming major health hurdles, which was definitely a surprise for us. Anyway, that's enough of me, and I'll see you next time.